Hey guitar fanatics, like the title says, give me just a little of your time today and I'm going to do my best to change the way that you see and think about the modes of the major scale forever. Now, learning modes is an important milestone for any musician because the different modes create different moods and emotions in the music that we play. But I wish I had $1 for every guitarist that I've met that has been confused and intimidated trying to learn the modes. And I gotta confess, I was one of them too. When I was first introduced to the modes, my teacher did a poor job of explaining what they were and how to use them, and it created a mental block that lasted for a long time. But one day while practicing, I made one of those awesome aha discoveries where the modes just suddenly made sense. And when you get it, it immediately makes a huge difference in your ability to write melodies and solo and improvise. In the decades since of playing and learning, I've refined my understanding of the modes even more. So I'm going to share some things with you today that I hope takes years off of your learning curve. Grab your guitar, let's learn about modes. So let me give you the big reveal up front and then we'll break it all down. To really understand the modes and how they work, it's all about seeing them in the right context. Let's check out a little music theory to set all this up the right way. The major scale has 7 notes. This is the C major scale with the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then we're back to C. If we stack together 3 notes that are each a third interval apart, and that just means use every other note, we get a 3-note chord that we call a triad. If we stack together, for instance, the notes C, E, and G, we get a C major triad. If we stack together the notes D, F, and A, we get a D minor triad. Now, the interval between the first and second note of the triad determines whether a triad is major or minor. With the C major triad, we've got E that is 4 frets or 2 whole steps above the C. We call that a major third. We get a major triad. In D minor, the F is 3 frets above the D. We call that a minor third, and so we get a minor triad. If we build a triad off each note of the scale, we get C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and the B diminished triad has 2 minor thirds stacked together. So in a major key, we have 3 major triads and 3 minor triads and a diminished triad. If we stack a 4th note on top of that triad, that 4th note is going to be the 7th note away from the root of the chord. So we call these 4-note chords 7th chords. In the key of C, the 7th chords are C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G7, A minor 7, and B minor 7 flat 5. So when I first learned the modes, my teacher presented them something like this. Okay, Charlie, we've learned the C major scale, and it has the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and back to C. Another name for the major scale is the Ionian mode. But if we play the notes of the C major scale from D to D, that creates another mode that we call Dorian. And if we play the scale from E to E, that creates a mode called Phrygian. And he gave me fingering charts showing the C major scale starting on and finishing on one of the 7 different notes, and they all had these strange sounding names. And learning the patterns wasn't a problem, but I still had no clue how to use them. I now know he presented them to me as what are called relative modes. The notes of the same scale, but starting on and playing to a note other than the root, like D to D or E to E. He kept telling me how each mode has a different sound, but I wasn't hearing that and I didn't understand. He'd give me a little chord progression to play over like D minor 7, to G7 to C major 7, what we call a 2-5-1 progression. Over the D minor, I'd play the C major scale from D to D. Over G7, I'd play the C major scale from G to G. And over the C major 7, of course, I'd just play the C major scale. And I was even more confused because there's nothing about what I was just playing that sounded interesting or different. All I could think was, this is a stupid waste of my time. All I'm doing is playing the C major scale over every chord. Now, I said earlier, the key to understanding the modes is being able to see them in the right context. And I couldn't understand what was going on because I was missing two important pieces of context. I'm going to explain those two things right now, and I hope you have the same lightning striking aha moment that I had back in the day. The first crucial piece of context is to understand how each mode is different from the other modes. So let's get into it. See, I was confused, and maybe you are too, because I was hearing 7 different names for the modes, but in my mind, I was just playing the same 7 notes over every chord. I kept hearing, for instance, that the Phrygian mode was supposed to sound exotic in Spanish. So I'd go to the 3rd chord in the key of C, which was E minor, and I'd play the C major scale from E to E, which is Phrygian mode, but there was no Spanish sound. It just sounded like the C major scale. I actually quit taking lessons for a while, and I remained lost in the wilderness as far as the modes were concerned. But after a few years, I started taking lessons again, and my very first questions to the new teacher were about modes. I brought up the example of E Phrygian mode over an E minor chord, and he just kind of smiled at me and said, try it over an E major chord. So I did, and I got this sound. My mind was blown, and all I could think was, holy crap, there's the Spanish sound Phrygian is supposed to have. So the first big revelation about context is that the chords you play over is what gives the modes their context. Playing the relative modes over chords from that same key, like E Phrygian over E minor or D Dorian over D minor, it's always just going to sound pretty much like the C major scale. But when you play a mode over a chord from a different key, like E Phrygian over E major, that's when the sound of the mode really comes alive. Now, we'll talk more about chords and modes in a minute, but the other critical piece of context also came into focus when I played that E Phrygian mode over an E major chord. Here we have 2 modes, E Ionian and E Phrygian. Now, they both started on an E note, but they're made up of radically different notes. So I started studying how to play all 7 modes starting from the same root note. This way of looking at the modes is called parallel modes. And I had another lightning strike aha moment. If we classify the 7 modes into 3 major modes, Ionian, Lydian, Mixolydian, and 4 minor modes with Dorian, Phrygian, Aeolian, and Locrian, well, you're going to see that if we start with the major scale or Ionian, we just have to change 1 note to get the other 2 major modes. And if we start with the minor scale or Aeolian, we can again change a note or 2, and we get the other 3 minor modes. Seeing modes in this way is not only easier to understand, but if you play the 7 modes of the major scale starting from the same root note, it makes it really easy to hear the differences. Let me show you those differences so that you can easily play all 7 modes. And we'll also talk about what chords to play them over so that the sound of the mode really pops. Let's take the C major scale again with the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. That's the Ionian mode, and of course, it's going to sound great over a C major chord. Now, to get C Lydian mode, All we have to do is sharpen the fourth note of the major scale. In this case, in the key of C, we're going to play an F sharp instead of F natural. Here's C Ionian. Here's C Lydian with the F sharp. Now, played over a C major chord, the sound of that F sharp really sticks out. People think of the Lydian mode as sounding dreamy and ethereal. And hearing the Joe Satriani song, Flying in a Blue Dream, is what led me to understand Lydian and really the way all of the rest of the modes work. That song features a D and C triad played over a pedaling C bass note. Hearing that F sharp of the D triad over a C bass note was a revelation to me. And what was so insightful is that each mode has a special note that makes it different from the other modes in its category of major or minor. Lydian has one different note from Ionian, the sharp 4. Well, how about Mixolydian? To get Mixolydian, we're going to start with the Ionian mode, and we're going to flatten the 7th note. So to get C Mixolydian, we took C Ionian with C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C, and we played B flat instead of B. And that gives us a sound that works perfectly over dominant 7 chords, because those chords are a major triad with a flat 7th stacked on top, and the Mixolydian mode is a major scale with a flat 7th degree. Think about a 1-4-5 progression in a blues or a country tune where each of the 3 chords is a dominant 7 chord. You can play Mixolydian all day long. So we started with the major scale, we changed 2 notes, and now we've got 3 different modes that we know and a much better idea of which chords to play them over. Now let's take a look at the minor modes. For the minor modes, we're going to start with the C natural minor scale, or the Aeolian mode. Now that scale is way different from the C major scale. We've got the notes C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, and C. So we've got a flat or minor 3rd note, and that makes the scale minor. We've also got a flat or minor 6th and a flat or minor 7th degree. So of course we can play C Aeolian mode over a C minor chord just to keep it simple. Now how about Dorian mode? To get C Dorian, we're going to make that flat 6th degree natural. So we're going to raise it half a step. So now we've got the notes C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B flat, and C. And this scale sounds amazing over a chord progression like C minor to F major. Kind of like a Santana thing. So the special note of Dorian is the raised 6. And when we write a melody or we improvise a solo, we want to take special care to accentuate that unique note. Now how about the next minor mode, which is Phrygian? We're going to go back to the natural minor, and this time we're going to flatten the 2nd note 1 fret. So now we have the notes C, D flat, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, and C. Played over a C minor chord, Phrygian doesn't sound all that special. But if we play it over a C major chord, and then add in the major chord 1 fret above and the major chord 3 frets above. So for C Phrygian, that would be C, D flat, E flat. There's that Spanish sound, especially if we take care to accentuate the D flat or that flat second. And lastly, we've got the Locrian mode, and the Locrian mode has 2 notes that are different from natural minor. We're going to flatten the second like Phrygian, but we're also going to flatten the 5th. So Locrian has the notes C, D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat, B flat, and C. All those flats make it a very dark sounding scale, and it works best over a minor 7 flat 5 chord. Here's C minor 7 flat 5. And we could use that chord in, say, a minor 2-5-1 in the key of B flat minor. We'd have C minor 7 flat 5, F7, and B flat minor. And the C Locrian sounds awesome over that C minor 7 flat 5. And over minor 7 flat 5 chords, that's about the only time you're ever going to use Locrian, to be honest. You're going to get a lot more mileage out of the other modes, so adjust your practice time accordingly. So that's all 7 modes. If we look at them as starting on the same root note or as parallel modes, it's pretty easy to see the differences. Remember that each mode has one note that makes it unique from the other modes in its same category, major or minor. And when you're soloing with a particular mode, make sure to accentuate that unique note of the mode to make the sound really come out. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a little something. Work hard, but have lots of fun playing that guitar and getting this stuff down. I'll be seeing you again soon. Bye for now.